Essay topics that I want you to be able to write on, be able to write about early man, okay? Prehistoric humans. Now, I'm not talking about proto-humans. I'm not talking about Homo habilis and Homo erectus and whatnot. I'm talking about actual people like you and me. What were the characteristics of prehistoric humans? How did they live culturally? What are the eras of prehistory? You get the idea, right? Essay topic number 2 would be Egypt, okay? What are the eras of Egypt? Names, dates, characteristics, things like that. Just, study what we talked about on ancient Egypt. And finally, ancient certainly, but finally topic number 3 would be the ancient Hebrews, okay? Why is studying their culture important? What is their basic history from the beginning through the Exodus? What are the lessons from their historic traditions? And why are these lessons considered very significant in Western identity? Regardless of whether or not Moses was real and those events happened the way they were, there's an awful lot that you can learn from that. And that's kind of a big part of why these traditions are so significant to Westerners, not just modern day Jews. But anyway, I will put 2 essay topics on the test. Okay, I'm not putting all 3 on there. I'll put 2 on there, and then you'll pick 1 to do. Okay, I'm not going to expect you to do more than 1. Do 1, but 2 of those 3 will be on there. And obviously, you notice there's not a whole lot of terms on the study guide. It may look like there are a lot of terms, but you'll find real quickly that you know most of them anyway if you've been coming to class and taking notes and paying attention. Any other terms that you don't know, you're certainly welcome to get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to clarify anything. Come by, visit, call, whatever. Okay, if you email me and I don't reply back quickly, give me a call. Okay, bug the daylights out on me until you hear from me, because I do not mind being bothered. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I'll clarify anything. The first part of the test is a fill in the blank kind of thing. I give you a sentence and then you put the proper answer in there. So for example, paintings in this French cave date back to the Paleolithic era and are excellent examples of prehistoric art, discovered in the 1940s. What's the answer? Lascaux, exactly. And so that's it. Now, there is nothing on there that is designed to be tricky. There's nothing on there that's designed to throw you off. There's nothing on there, I don't do anything like that. Everything is completely straightforward. The biggest issue that you'll probably run into is you'll read something and you'll be like, oh, that's too easy. That can't be the answer. Yeah, that's the answer. Okay, really, honestly, there's nothing about my exams that's designed to be difficult. I took the test just yesterday, made an A. Okay, so just to let you know. But in any event, very straightforward. Everybody in here is taking a test. And if you have any questions, by all means. You do not need to bring a blue book. You do not need to bring a Scantron. All you need to do is bring your brain and some of your own paper. Okay. Now, you don't have to use your own paper. I'll have some. But if you want to write your essay on your own paper, that might be preferable. All right. Any questions? Anything at all? Okay. We're going to discuss our final topic today. And that is Greece. We're going to talk about the ancient Greeks. And when we're finished today, we're finished. So I don't know how long today will go. We'll just find out. Everybody in here, in one way or another, is familiar with the ancient Greeks. Like the Egyptians, we know that ancient Greece is very significant. We know that it played a very big role in the development of Western culture, but the details are what matter. Oh yeah, the Ark of the Covenant. We've got Charlton Heston being awesome as Moses. This is a modern depiction of what the Temple of Solomon would have looked like. Here it is today, and they're pretty sure it's the right spot. Now those are mosques. There's 2 mosques on here because this is an Islamic holy site too. That's a mosque and that's a mosque. And this is the most contested piece of real estate on the planet, bar none, because Muslims consider it holy for themselves. Hebrews, Jews consider it extremely holy for them, and they want to rebuild the temple. And you can't rebuild the temple without obviously tearing up some very, very important historic mosques, and the two sides can't learn to share. And so the old city of Jerusalem, and this specific part called the Temple Mount or the Noble Sanctuary, depending on your religious point of view, is exceptionally holy to both religions. Right below that, this is what is known as the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall. And it is the final section. It is the only surviving section of the original temple complex. That's it, this little section of wall right here. And so all these are mostly Jews, and they go to the wall and they pray in front of it, and there's a tradition to write a prayer on a little piece of paper and jam it in the cracks. And then right up above is the Mosque of Omar, which is an extremely important mosque to Muslims. And again, the two sides haven't learned how to share yet, and so there's kind of a problem there. And so if you want to know what one of the causes of so much tension and strife between Palestinians who are Muslim and Jews in Israel is, not the only issue by any means, but certainly a big issue is the status of the Temple Mount. I say give it to the Chinese. Honest to goodness, I really do. I say let the Chinese have it. Because, see, the Chinese would take care of it. They're very good at taking care of very old, ancient stuff, right? And they don't have a dog in the fight at all. They're perfectly happy to just kind of keep it and be cool with it. So I say give it to China and problem solved. You know, kind of like when you were kids and you and your brother were fighting over who gets something, and so your parents said, well, then neither of you can have it. And they just walk away. Well, do the same thing with this, right? There you go. And, of course, the Ark of the Covenant was discovered by Indiana Jones, and when they opened it, God melted their faces, and now the Ark is in a research place.
The Ark was discovered by Indiana?
No, it's a joke, of course. It's a movie. Who in here has not seen Raiders of the Lost Ark? Okay, you got to watch that tonight. Okay, Raiders of the Lost Ark has to be watched tonight because it's obviously completely fiction, but boy, is it a great movie. The greatest adventure movie of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Okay, now we can talk about Greece. Greece is important. I don't need to tell you that. Greece is a cornerstone civilization. What's significant about it? It's a small little place. There weren't a whole lot of Greeks. There's plenty of other people that we could be talking about, of course. Why do we place so much significance on the Greeks? Well, in very simple terms, the Greeks are the first Westerners. The Greeks are the first Westerners. The Greeks are the originators of what we call Western culture or Western civilization. And Western civilization has spread throughout the world now, and to be a Westerner is a certain identity that has been understood and celebrated for millennia because of the ancient Greeks. We talked about the Persians and the Egyptians and the Assyrians and whatever, and I let the cat out of the bag before. These were remarkable cultures. Nobody would deny that, and they achieved so much. They math and science and literature and art and all this stuff that they did. I wouldn't say literature so much, but to a certain extent. But one thing that they were lacking, one ingredient in the creation of what we would call the Western world today, is philosophy. They didn't have philosophy. And philosophy has to be there for us to be Westerners. So what do I mean by philosophy? What do I really mean? Philosophy is an attempt to understand the world on human terms. Philosophy is an attempt to understand the world on human terms. Now, there's lots of different definitions we could come up with. And once the Greeks come up with philosophy in the West, now there's Easterners that come up with philosophy. The Chinese came up with philosophy too. But once the Greeks develop philosophy, everything about Western identity changes. Everything about Western identity changes. If we go to an Egyptian We got our Egyptian here, and we say, hey, buddy, why does it rain? You know, what's rain? Why does it rain? What's the Egyptian guy going to tell you? He's got the answer. What is it?
God.
Gods. Right, exactly. The rain god makes it rain, right? What is that big fireball-looking thing in the sky? Oh, well, that's the Eye of Ra, right? You know, moving across the sky, looking down on us, or whatever that was. You know, nature gods were the explanation for everything about how the world worked. I don't understand it. We talked about that earlier. You know, I plant the little brown seed in the ground and food grows out. I don't get it. It must be the gods. And of course, the gods are all powerful and the gods are all knowing. And you cannot question the gods, can you? They control every aspect of our lives and every aspect of our identity. Now, we go to a Greek. We go up to him and say, hey, buddy, why does it rain? That Greek's going to sit there and go, you know, I never really thought about it, but I don't know. It's a pretty interesting phenomenon, isn't it? Water falling from the sky. Huh. Why does it rain? Yeah, good question, man. I don't know. And then the Egyptian goes up to him and he says, I know why it rains. It is the rain god making it rain. And the Greek guy's going to say, yeah, have you ever met him? You know this rain god? Can I go over and talk to him and ask him what's going on? Oh, well, we can't question the gods, right? Well, the Greek guy says, I'll question the gods. If you don't show me this rain god, if you can't introduce me to this rain god, it sounds to me like you're just making it up. How about you just admit you don't know, and there, you know, being honest. Why do we get sick? I don't know. What's that big fireball in the sky? Well, it'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it? You'll get the point, right? I want to know what's really going on. I'm not just going to blame everything on the gods and not ask anymore. And you see, once you do that, once you say, I don't know, all of a sudden you realize you don't know anything, do you? If you say, I'm not going to blame it on the gods, all of a sudden the Greeks realize we know nothing about the natural world. Why does the food grow? Why are the babies born? Why does the rain fall? What is the sun? Why do we get sick? None of it we understand. So once we come to that, what happens next? What do we start doing? Questioning it. I want to figure it out. Why does it really rain? Why do people really get sick? What is the actual process that is making the food come out of the ground? I can understand this. I can figure it out. I have a brain. How about I use it? I want to know what's really going on. And it's a light bulb moment. It is an absolute light bulb moment. All of a sudden, their eyes are opened and they start actually learning. They start actually learning. Greek culture permeates so much about how we live today. We don't know it, but we do, but it does. Our art is based on the ancient Greeks. Our architecture is based on the ancient Greeks. Our education system is based on the ancient Greeks. What you are doing right now is an ancient Greek ceremony, because the ancient Greeks invented education as we understand it. A bunch of students come to a room, you got an instructor in the front, a professor, a teacher, whatever you want to call him, and you are being taught something. You are being taught a subject. And then when you're done being taught this subject, you go to another room and another teacher teaches you another subject. And an educated person is supposed to have a good knowledge of all the different aspects of how the world works. What do you think you're being taught? You're being taught philosophy. You're being taught philosophy. This is exactly what the ancient Greeks would do, and we figured out it works pretty well. Our politics are based on the ancient Greeks. And of course, our general identity, it all goes back to the Greeks. We cannot get away from it. And there will be a clear delineation between Western people and Eastern people once once this spreads. Now there's two pre-Greek people that I'd like to discuss. These people are not Greeks, but they're the precursors to the Greeks. One group are the Minoans. And the Minoans lived on the island of Crete. And here it is right here, but I'll write it bigger because you can't see the board in the back. And Crete is here in the Mediterranean. It's in between Greece and Turkey, right there. You know, it's an island. The capital is Knossos. So it's out in the middle of the Mediterranean. Crete is very rocky and mountainous. A lot of copper. You know, a lot of the mountains are made out of copper. So, of course, we already know you can't farm on a mountain, can you? And they live on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. So right away, what do these people do for a living? How do these people live? What are they? They're fishermen. You know, now, of course, they farm to some extent, but there's just not a lot of good farmland. And so their culture is not developed around agriculture. Their culture is developed around living off the water. They fish, they sail. These are water people. These are water people. And the Minoan culture, the Minoan civilization, reaches its peak about 1800 BC. It reaches its peak about 1800 BC. And of course, what's really important to understand is that if you're a fishing culture, is it only counts if you do it naked, right? I mean, you gotta just, you know, go full Monty if you're going to go fishing, apparently. About 1450 BC, something happened, and the Minoan civilization just went away. Something happened about 1450 BC. Obviously, a catastrophic event of some sort.
1450?
Yeah, BC. And ladies and gentlemen, that was it for the Minoans. Nobody really knows. Was it a disease outbreak? Was it a big nasty earthquake? Yes, there are earthquakes in that part of Europe. Were they invaded? You know, we talked about those sea people that invaded. You know, maybe those people had something to do with it. Nobody really knows, but some sort of really, really nasty event took out the Minoans about 1450 BC. A second group of people, and I'll just write it here, this isn't them, are the Mycenaeans. And the Mycenaeans actually lived on the Greek mainland. These were the ancestors to the Greeks themselves. We don't really consider them Greek, but they're Greek-ish.
I'm sorry, you said they what?
Mycenaeans. They lived on the Greek mainland. And they're not Greek, but obviously they are the ancestors of the Greeks. Mycenaean culture peaked 1400 to 1200 BC. That's when Mycenaean culture was at its peak.
What BC?
1400 to about 1200 BC, and these are general dates. But that leads us to the Greeks. And you know, here is a larger view of the, well, here's Greece over here. You know, here's what would be Persia, and then we have Anatolia, which is Turkey, and Greece is way over here. Show you the Persian Empire. You know, here's, from the Persian point of view, here's the Mediterranean. There's Crete, where the Minoans were, and here is Greece here. So it's southeastern Europe, very, very close to Asia Minor. And it's not big. You know, it's not a big place. Now, it's Minoan people would vault over bulls. The men, that was one of the things that they would do. A bull would charge the young man, and he would vault over it and apparently get one heck of a tan in the process of doing it. We got the precursors to Johnny Knoxville, I think, going on over here. Okay, so what's Greece? Well, you can understand quite a bit about a culture. You can understand quite a bit about a culture by looking at its physical geography. Physical geography is very important to understand how a people live and what their values are going to be. And the physical geography of Greece is rocky and mountainous. You know, like Crete, it's jagged and full of rocks and full of mountains. The coastline is all over the place, and so there's all sorts of ports and harbors and inlets and peninsulas. Water is everywhere. Beautiful views, ladies and gentlemen. There's hundreds of islands all around Greece in the Aegean and the Ionian Seas. And like I said, Greece itself has all sorts of mountainous terrain. So again, what does that tell us about the Greeks? They're not really farmers. Now again, they do farm where they can. They do farm where they can. It's just that the water is so much more part of how they live. The Greeks fish, the Greeks travel, the Greeks sail. All those ports and harbors and natural inlets make it possible for them to send their boats out, and lack of good farmland means they live off the sea. They are water people. They are water people. All of these mountains also make it somewhat difficult for them to hook up. Instead of having one broad culture connected by, a big flat area, there's a series of little pockets of humanity in Greece with big mountain ranges separating them. And so we're the people here and they're the people over there, and on the other side of that mountain range are the other people. They grow up isolated from each other. They're all Greek. They have the same language and cultures and ancestors and all of that. It's just that, we're here and they're there and you're over there. You get the idea. And so Greece does not unify politically. Greece does not have one king that rules them all, like we would see in Egypt or Mesopotamia. Flat land where everybody can travel and communicate and armies can move very easily, of course. No, not in Greece. Greece develops a series of city-states. Greece develops a series of city-states. Yes, I'm Greek, but I am not politically connected to those people over there. And the Greeks like it this way. They like the fact that they are politically independent. And the fact that they are so isolated from other people, they like the fact that they are Greek. I'm Greek and you're not. They know about these other people in other parts of the Mediterranean world, and the Greeks are not them. You are not in our cultural family is kind of the idea. We are independent city-states, etc. Each independent city-state was called a polis. Each independent city-state was called a polis. And two of them will become the largest, the most powerful, the sort of big kids on the playground. What two city-states come to dominate the others? Not completely, but you get the idea. What are they?
Athens and Sparta.
Athens and Sparta. Athens and Sparta. Athens is over here, and Sparta is down here. And this piece of land, you can see there's just a tiny little land bridge. This is the Peloponnesus. Oops, that's an E. Pelo.
What did you say about Athens?
Athens and Sparta are the dominant city-states. They're the biggest, the most powerful, the most influential. But at any given time, there's 12, 13, 14 of them. So there's a bunch of city-states, but Athens and Sparta tend to be the biggest. And so you can kind of see there's two regions of Greeks, aren't there? You know, we've got the mainland and then we have the Peloponnesus. They're all Greeks, but, you know, we're the northerners and they're the southerners, that sort of thing. And of course, over the centuries, they have good times, bad times. They fight each other a lot. They are friends with, they interact and trade with each other. Everybody, we're all Greeks. That's how it works. Well, farmland is hard to come by. We don't have a lot of good farmland. We're doing pretty well as people, having lots of babies, growing up. We're secure. We feel good about ourselves. Hooray for us being Greek. But the problem they're running into is the fact that Greece is not that big. And these city-states are not, not very expansive. There's mountains in the way. And so as the population grows, where are we all going to live? How are we all going to eat? Early on, not much of a problem, but at some point, the younger generations are having a hard time making it. And so when you look at the Mediterranean world, and admittedly, I do need a better map. There are other lands to the east and then over here to the west. That would be Italy. And the Greeks are water people, aren't they? They're good at sailing. And so if you can't make it in one location, I don't have Italy there, you'll have to trust me on that one. If you can't make it here, get on a boat and go over there. And so for many, many generations, that was kind of the pattern. These more populous city-states would colonize other areas. I can't get good farmland here, but over there, there's a place for me to live. And so Greek colonies spread out around the Mediterranean world. This right here is along the coast of present-day Turkey. Again, we call it Anatolia. And there's all sorts of Greek outposts and colonies and settlements. And these people, I'm Greek. They consider themselves Greek. They're just not necessarily living in Greece. And the Aegean Sea here is pretty much a Greek lake. Another characteristics of humanity. Whenever times are hard, whenever there's too many of us here, what do? We pack up and go over there, right? The United States was settled by people coming over here for a better life. And throughout the 18th and 19th and into the 20th century, and even today, people are coming here because they can't do very well where they are. This is the land of opportunity. Of course, that can't go on forever. Sooner or later, you run out of land there too. Other people are living here, and they're not too thrilled about giving up their land to these weird Greeks that are showing up. And the new Greeks show up, and the old Greeks that are already there are like, hey, sorry, no land here. You got to go somewhere else. Sooner or later, you're going to run out of space. It's just a guarantee. By about 600 BC, that's the problem. We're really running out of space. And I want to talk about Athens specifically, because I'm really talking about Athens here. We're running out of space. Athens itself is overpopulated, meaning if you're young, it's very hard to make it. It's very hard to get a farm or get a house or whatever. And the Athenians have been sending colonies out for just decades, for generations, and now those colonies don't want all these other people. Now those colonies are like, nope, can't use you here. So now we got to solve the problem. And what's the problem? Too many people, not enough food, not enough space. We can't just send people away when it becomes inconvenient. And the Athenians are going to want to solve this in a way that is humane, and the Athenians see this as something that has to be addressed in a mature manner, if you will. There was a Greek elder, and his name was Solon, an Athenian elder. I'm talking about the Athenians here. Solon had been a leader of Athens for a while. He was a respected man, very intelligent, an elder in the community. Take this off for a minute if that's all right. And they went to Solon and said, solve this problem. Too many people, not enough room. Solon, we need your help. And Solon said, okay, I'll solve it. Let me see if there's a solution to this overpopulation issue. And he studied, and he observed, and he took notes, and he looked around. And after a while, he came back and said, I have the answer. I'm going to solve the problem. And I'm simplifying it, but that's what we need to do. First of all, my fellow Athenians, we've got the problem all wrong. Because you see, we don't have a food shortage. We don't have food shortage. We grow enormous amounts of food in the farmland that we have. And compared to the other city-states, we actually have a pretty good amount of good farmland. We've got a fantastic port. Our ships go out every day and bring in barrels of fish. And you know what? It wouldn't be hard to build a few more ships now, would it? We could bring in more fish. They're not running out. Remember, this is a few millennia ago. Overfishing is an issue today, but it certainly wasn't an issue for them. So you know what, my fellow Athenians? We do not actually have a shortage of food. Nobody in Athens needs to go hungry. And I got to be honest with you, we really don't have a space problem either. Your average family doesn't need a large home. We've got plenty of room. The problem that I see is that we're not distributing our resources accurately. We're not making sure that everybody has enough to eat. We're not making sure that everybody has land. You see, our fishermen come in with boatloads of fish, and an awful lot of it gets sent out and sold to other people. Our farmers grow huge amounts of food, and that food leaves. It goes somewhere else. Those farmers sell it. They want money. You see, what we've got is a small group of us that have vastly more than we need. And what that means, of course, is that an awful lot of us can't get anything. There really is only so much land. So why do you have an enormous field that's so big you could never possibly eat all the food that's grown on it, and you over here have zilch? Seems to me like that's a bigger problem than we don't have food. So here are my solutions. And if we do this, problem solved. 3 rules. 3 rules. Rule number 1, limit the amount of land that any one man can own. Limit the amount of land that any one man can own. Because if we do that, it will open up land for other people that can't get it. Limit the amount of land that any one man can own. That doesn't sound that complicated. Rule number 2, abolish debt slavery. Abolish debt slavery. The Greek culture was a typical ancient culture, of course. They had their slaves, they had their commoners, they had their nobility. And of course, they don't want to get rid of slavery. Nobody's recommending that, not even Solon. The question is, what does it take for you to become a slave? What is the manner by which you would go from a free person to an enslaved person? And one of the most common ways for that to happen is when you go into so much debt you can never pay it back. And so the person that you owe takes you as a slave to cover your debt, or will take one of your family members as a slave. Yes, it's a cruel world we're living in. That's a way to pay off debt. And what happens, of course, is that a lot of people end up enslaved that way. And so you know what? You cannot be enslaved because of debt. You cannot be enslaved because of debt. That will reduce the number of slaves, and by that very factor alone, it will reduce the amount of poverty and hunger and want that we will have in Athens. Slaves are by default going to have a hard life. And here's where it gets real interesting. Rule number 3. Athens should be governed by a council of 400. Athens should be governed by a council of 400. Instead of a king or a dictator or a small group of nobility making all the laws, 400 randomly chosen Athenians will govern Athens. And the key here is they will come from all walks of life. Not just the rich, not just the poor, not just the middle class. We will have a council where people are chosen randomly. And it can be a 2-year term, and then somebody else can get chosen. And so there's constantly new people on the council. All voices can be heard. All opinions can be heard. And the council will make the law. The council will decide how Athens is to be governed. You see, one aspect of sociology that we have to always understand is that we're going to have a hierarchy in society. We're going to have wealthy, we're going to have a middle class, we're going to have poor. No society has ever existed that didn't have that. It's not going to be possible to create one that isn't that way. And every class of citizen will take care of themselves at the expense of the others. If you put only the rich people in charge, big surprise, all of the laws benefit the rich at the expense of the middle class and the poor. If you put just the poor people in charge, and that's happened before, the first thing the poor people do is take everything away from the rich and the middle class. And although you might say, oh yeah, stick it to the man, the reality is when that happens, society collapses. When that happens, you end up far worse off than when you started. Sorry, poor people, take it all from the rich is not a way to build a just society. You are not going to like what happens if that is your attitude, because it's been tried before. Put the middle class in charge, the poor get stuck, and so do the rich. There's a problem here. So how about we create a council of 400 and we let everybody have a voice? Random citizens chosen. Now Solon, of course, is being reasonable, I suppose. I mean, he's not making perfect suggestions, but they are a step in the right direction. And he was rejected. What, are you crazy? Come on, Solon, I told you to fix the problem. I didn't say take away our wealth. It was the wealthy, powerful people that asked him to solve the problem, right? So here's my solution. We're going to take your land. We're going to take your power. We're going to take your slaves. Forget it. And so Solon's ideas did not get put in place because the wealthy, powerful people in Greece were not about to give up what they had. And that was really going to have to be the solution. I mean, everything that he was recommending was sticking it to the wealthy. Forget that. So there we go. Along comes Pisistratus. Along comes Pisistratus, about a generation later. Pisistratus is a wealthy, powerful man, and he wants to rule Athens. Make no mistake about it. He wants to be the boss. He wants to be the boss. And twice he tried to conquer with an army. He tried to overthrow the government, and both times he failed. Twice he tried to overthrow the government, and both times he failed. So on the third time, he took a different approach. He turned to the middle classes, the people in the middle. And if you think about it, the people in the middle were the ones that liked what Solon had said. Now, Solon's gone by now, but the bug had been planted. There's a different way. You see, the middle class are not people with lots of land, right? So they're not going to lose land if you restrict it. The middle class don't really have slaves. The middle class are possibly going to be enslaved if they end up catching a bad break. the middle class have no power in the government, then I'd love to sit on a council. And of course, the middle class are, tend to be educated and hardworking, and they certainly pay their taxes and contribute. So the middle class liked what Solon had to say. Oddly enough, the poor didn't like what Solon had to say. Now, you think this is helping the poor. We're going to try to stop you from being enslaved. But the poor have to borrow money, and if you can't enslave people, then they're not going to loan you money to begin with. If you want to borrow money, you have to have some sort of collateral. And so the poor people immediately said, we'll never be able to borrow money, so you can forget that. But anyway, Pisistratus turns to the middle class. He says, you know what? If you get behind me and we overthrow this wealthy elite nobility that's keeping everybody down, I'll be your friend. I'll take care of you. And on the third try, with the support of the middle class, Pisistratus rules Athens. Pisistratus takes over. And he will rule Athens for many years. And yes, he did take care of the middle class. You think he'd make a promise and then, I'm going to welch on that. The answer is no. Whenever he took power, he went in and he took all the big land from all those wealthy noblemen and redistributed it, gave it to the people. He is nicknamed Pisistratus the Tyrant. But it wasn't a bad term. I mean, you think not a nice thing to call someone, but it was not a negative term. Now, he's also thinking, this is going to keep him in power, because you see, if I come in and I take the land from the elites that own it all and I distribute it to the middle classes that put me in power, they're always going to keep me in power. Because if I go, they're going to lose their land when the rich people come back. You see, as long as I'm in power, you get to keep your land, so I can be a total buffoon and you'll still back me. So this isn't entirely just him being nice. He's making a very real, very shrewd political calculation. Keep the people dependent on me being in power. Keep the people dependent on me being in power. Anyway, Pisistratus dies. His sons were not able to carry on the legacy. Now what are we going to do? So in 527 BC, we have to decide what type of government we're going to have. We have to decide how we're going to rule ourselves. Are we going to figure out some way for the middle class to come along? Are we going to let the elites come back? What's the deal? What's the deal? Along comes Cleisthenes. And no, none of these names get easier to spell. And they're all just a bunch of burly-looking Greek dudes. And so, pick one. They all pretty much look the same. Cleisthenes comes to power after Pisistratus. Not immediately, but, shortening the story. And Cleisthenes did something remarkable. Cleisthenes did something amazing, something that had never been done before. Can you even do this? I have no idea. After a few years in power, Cleisthenes gave it up, walked away. I don't need to do this anymore. I don't need to be the dictator. Cleisthenes is the father of democracy. Cleisthenes is the father of democracy. Because you see, when he walked away, he decided, I heard about this guy Solon from a few decades ago, and he had these new ideas, and we've experimented with giving the middle class more agency anyway, so maybe.
You say he's the what?
The father of democracy. The father of democracy. So Cleisthenes created, in 507 BC, the Council of 500. Now it's 100 more, but it's the same idea. The Council of 500. "500 citizens chosen randomly that will govern Athens." 500 citizens chosen randomly that will govern Athens. We will no longer have a dictator. We will now be ruled by the people. Demos. is the people. A theocracy is a government ruled by religion. An autocracy is a government ruled by dictators. A democracy is a government of the people. So 500 citizens randomly chosen every 2 years, and they'll be the boss. They'll be the boss. Now, there are going to be a few rules. There are going to be a few rules. First of all, you have to be a citizen to sit on the council. I didn't say 500 residents. I said 500 citizens. And there is a difference. Remember, we are the Greeks, and the Greeks have this very unique identity. And so as people move around, you might be living somewhere, but you are not one of us, so to speak. And so the concept of citizenship is now far more legally recognized. So what is a citizen? What does it take to be a citizen? Well, first of all, you can see this one coming. You have to be a man to be a citizen. Women are not citizens. There are a handful of situations where the council will grant citizenship to women. Those are exceptions, not the rule. You have to be a man. You have to be 21 years old to be a citizen. And you have to be the son of a citizen. You have to be a man, you have to be 21, and you have to be the son of a citizen. So immigrants, women, slaves, minors, you are not eligible. You are not eligible. The key there, though, is it's not saying how educated you have to be. We're not saying how wealthy you have to be or how influential you have to be. All you have to do is be a male, 21, son of a citizen, and you are eligible for the council. So the council will have many different voices. Secondly, of course, we're not electing members of the council. They are chosen randomly. Your name gets pulled, you're on the council. This is still democracy, but it's not elective democracy. And so there's a difference there, but it is still considered democracy. You can only serve a couple of times in your lifetime. If your name gets pulled more than a few times, you're no longer eligible to be on the council. There's a limit, term limits, if you will. But there we go. He also introduces juries for people who are accused of crimes. If you're accused of a crime, you will be tried before a jury of citizens. And you can explain why you're innocent, and there can be a prosecution explaining why you're guilty. And the jury itself will decide you're guilty or innocent, not just some appointed judge or something like that. And of course, the juries are chosen randomly as well. That's a lot more fair. Now, there is no specific number for who's on a jury. The only rule is it has to be an odd number. And so that way, when they vote, guilty or innocent, there you go. And of course, the jury would also determine what your punishment is if you're found guilty. So it's not exactly like our modern justice system, but you can see how our modern justice system is based on that. You can see where our modern justice system ultimately comes from. Of course, the council can grant citizenship to foreigners. It can grant citizenship to others. It rarely does, but it's not an unheard of situation. Now, there are going to be people that don't like democracy. There are going to be people that are reticent about this whole democratic thing. Democracy, I'm sorry to tell you, is the best form of government we have, but it is far from a perfect form of government. Far from perfect. So I'll just ask you, and believe it or not, some of the great philosophers, Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, they like democracy. They didn't like it at all. So very, very learned men were not so cool with it. So I'll ask you, what are some of the criticisms of democracy? We have to have introspective. Even if we're fans of democracy, if we're not willing to acknowledge its flaws, then we're not being philosophical. So I'll ask you, what are problems with democracy? What might be a problem with it?
What's good for one group of people?
I'm sorry, a little louder.
What's good for one group of people might not be good for the rest.
What's that? What's good for?
One group of people might not be.
What's good for one group of people might not be good for us. And I think that kind of what you're getting at there is, if we have a random council of 500 people, One group is going to say, hey, you know, like I said, like the poor people on the council are all going to want what's for the poor, and the rich people on the council are all going to be what's for the rich. Now, are there going to be more poor people or rich people on the council? Probably a lot more poor people, right? Because there's not that many rich people to begin with. And so, you know, you could end up having the council dominated by one group of people with an agenda, and they get to make the law, don't they? So there's a problem there. You're absolutely right. What might be another problem with democracy? I'll give you the most straightforward one. Are there people out there that are definitely not qualified to sit on the council? Go to Walmart and look around and ask me if you want those people making your laws, right? We're just being honest here, right? We're just being honest here. You're going to get intelligent people. You're going to get hardworking people. You're also going to get incompetent people. You're going to get corrupt people. You're going to get people who are only looking to serve their own self-interest, and that is just about every politician that has ever lived. Okay, they are not ruling for the best interests of the people. They're ruling for what's good for them. Okay? I'm sorry, but it just happens to be reality. Not everybody is capable of operating in leadership roles. It's how humanity is. And if you don't believe me, you've never been to Walmart, right? Just being honest. Crowds tend to be emotionally swayed. Demagogues tend to emerge in situations where large groups of people have authority. And what's a demagogue? A demagogue is a cult of personality individual. A demagogue is somebody who shows up and claims to have all the answers and I'm going to solve all the problems. And usually it's those people over there that are causing all the problems and put all the power in my hands and I'll solve everything and I'm perfect and I can never make mistakes. Dictator types. And you should understand that anybody who presents themselves that way automatically is somebody who has no business governing. Because they're lying. Flat out lying. Nobody has a monopoly on good judgment. Nobody knows everything. Nobody can solve every problem without consequences. That is not how the world works. The leaders you need to be going for are leaders who say, I'm going to do the best I can, but I won't be perfect. I don't understand everything, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to surround myself with people who are smart. When I make a mistake, I'm going to apologize for it. And yes, I will make mistakes. You would too if you were in charge. That's the kind of person who has leadership ability, right? Now, is that the kind of person we like to elect? Of course not. We like to elect the strong man who has all the answers. Don't vote for that guy. I'm going to jump way ahead. You need to understand this. Hitler was elected. He was voted into power by the German people. I have all the answers, and I'm going to solve all the problems, and I'm going to turn Germany into this powerful state, and it's those people, the Jews, that are so horrible, and we got to get rid of all of them. And he was a brilliant public speaker, and he rallied all the crowds, and he was the worst choice in the history of politics for someone to be put in power. And people like him get elected all the time, don't they? Because democracy creates that environment for a great public speaker to present himself well. We don't vote for people who are most capable. We vote for people who can present themselves and be good public speakers. And that ain't good. That ain't good. Democracy will create inconsistency in government. Every 2 years, so for 2 years we're going to have one set of laws, and then for 2 more years we'll have another set of laws, and then for 2 more years, and it's just constantly shifting and constantly changing. And every time a new group of people get in charge, they change everything. That ain't good. That ain't good. So, what's the short answer? I like democracy. I'm assuming you do too. Do not pretend that it's perfect. Do not pretend that it's perfect. Today, of course, our version of democracy, at least in true democratic countries, involves people voting, right? Adults go to the polling place and vote. And I 100% guarantee you there are plenty of people that have no business voting on an intellectual level. They have no idea what the issues are. They have no knowledge of the candidates themselves, but they still get to vote, don't they? And we wouldn't have a democracy without them having that ability. So democracy ain't perfect. Democracy ain't perfect. Let's talk about Sparta. We're talking about Athens. We're giving Athens an awful lot of airtime here. What about the Spartans? this other big dominant city-state down to the south? Well, Sparta is very different from Athens. Sparta is very different. Now, it's Greek and Greek culture and all of that. That's not what I'm getting at. But Sparta had a very, very large population of slaves. Nobody really knows exactly what the ratio was, but the going interpretation is that there are 10 slaves in Sparta for every free man. There are 10 slaves in Sparta for every free man. And that's, I don't know what the real number is, but you get the idea. Lots and lots of slaves in Sparta. And so Spartan society was organized around rigidity, around order, around obeying the law, doing what you're told. Severe punishments for anybody who doesn't march in line. That was the Spartan ideology. We're not about to consider giving people the freedom to make their own choices. The last thing we want is for the slaves to start wondering why they're slaves, right? We're not going to concern ourselves with people that are hungry. Because if we start saying, we've got to find a way for everyone to eat, well, there's 10 slaves to every one person. How are we going to deal with that? So Spartan society was rigid and ordered, conservative, no changes, no experiments with this democracy nonsense. Every Spartan man, citizen that is a soldier. That's what the Spartan men do. They are soldiers, period. Slaves do everything else, and women. At age 7, you are taken away from your family and raised in military barracks and trained entirely for warfare. So by the time you reach maturity, you are going to be one heck of a soldier. And every Spartan man, that is his only occupation. As a matter of fact, when infants are born, infants that are weak or sickly are simply killed because Sparta has no tolerance for the weak or the infirm. Spartan women are married at a young age, and their number one role is to produce soldiers. That is the only real honorable act for a Spartan woman. You are to be a soldier-making machine. And the greatest honor for a Spartan woman is for her sons to be killed on the battlefield. They cry with joy when they learn that their sons died fighting the enemy. And the greatest dishonor in Sparta, not just for you, but for your family, is for you to die with an injury in your back. If you die with an injury in the back, what does that mean? A little louder? Yeah, you were running away. You were retreating. Spartan men can only die with injuries in the front. I face the enemy. I do not run from the enemy. Spartan men have to be married by age 30. And if you are not married by age 30, a wife is found for you. And if you do not produce children, another man is brought in to see if he can get the job done. Yes, that's exactly what I just said. Your wife's going to get pregnant one way or the other. Or we're certainly going to try. Of course, there is no tolerance for infractions of the law in Sparta. Even minor crimes are punished very severely. Sparta is ruled by 2 kings. And there is a council of about 10 Spartan generals. And that's it. That's where the law comes from. Now, why would Sparta have 2 kings instead of 1? There's a military council, and then there's 2 kings that rule Sparta. Why 2? Why do we want 2 instead of 1? Well, think about it. What happens if we're off at war and one of them has to be leading the army? We still have to have a guy at home, right? What happens if one of them dies, like a vice president? There's always someone in charge if we have 2 instead of 1. Because order and security are what really matters here. In many ways, Sparta and Athens reflect the 2 different elements of human society and the human psyche. We all want to live in a society that is free, that is open, where people can experiment and do what they want, where we're, willing to try new ideas. Everybody likes that. I want a society where you can do what you want to do and I can do what I want to do, etc., etc. That being said, human nature being what it is, when you give people too much freedom, you end up with chaos. When you give people too much freedom, we end up with anything but a comfortable, stable society. You're free to do whatever you want. Well, if you're my neighbor, you better not blast your music in the middle of the night or we're going to have a problem, aren't we? So it doesn't sound to me like you are free to do whatever you want. We need to have a rule against that. You're free to do what you want, but the minute you put a Camaro on blocks right on your yard with weeds growing through it, no, I don't want to live in a neighborhood like that. So no, you are not free to do anything you want. There needs to be rules and order. So where do we draw that line? Where do we draw that line? Well, Athens is open to freedom and experimentation. Sparta, rules, order, stability. Both have to exist in a society. Both have to be there if this is going to be a place that you want to live. And to what extent we have A and to what extent we have B is certainly subject to debate. But anybody who thinks about how society should be governed has to understand that. You can't have absolute freedom. You cannot have absolute rigidity. The Spartan people are traditionally founded by the Dorians. That's sort of the legendary people that founded Sparta. The Athenians are founded by the Ionians. So the ancient Spartans were called Dorians. The ancient Athenians were called Ionians. And their architecture looked a little different. The columns that they built in front of their temples had a different look to them. One representing freedom and one representing order, that sort of thing. Some say that Sparta and Athens represent the masculine and the feminine. Men are do your job, march in step, order. Women are more free and open and maternal. And of course, I don't need to tell you that the Spartan army was incredible. Right? The Spartan army is the baddest army in the ancient world. The Spartans fear no one. The Spartans fight as a form of diplomacy. Military honor in Sparta sits at the heart of their identity. And so if there's an army you want on your side, you want to be allies with the Spartans. And that is one army that you never want to have to oppose, because every single man has been a soldier his entire life. And that's something to keep in the back of your head. And with that, I think we can be done. Are there any questions? Anything at all? No? Okay, look, folks. Oh, yes. A study guide, you bet. Oh, yeah. Anybody else need one? I've got it right here. Yeah, anyone who came in late, just come on up. And I will see everybody on Thursday. Bring your brain, bring paper, bring a pencil. And if there's any questions at all, just get in touch with me. And everyone who came in.